The first insult didn't come from a stranger. It came from my baby sister. "Why is she even here?" Mandy asked, loud enough for everyone in the dining room to hear. "Dad's barely cold, and the killer shows up in pearls and perfume." I blinked. Not because the words shocked me. God knows they'd been circling the room in whispers for weeks now, but because she said it so openly, so publicly, right in front of the casserole dish and the framed photo of Dad smiling by his fishing boat. It was the night of Dad's memorial dinner. Supposed to be a small, private gathering. Just family, some old friends, a few neighbors. But as soon as I walked in, I knew I didn't belong there. The air thickened, like it had swallowed its breath and was waiting to exhale once I left. Uncle Fred gave me a nod, but even that felt like obligation. My cousins glanced up and looked away. And Mom, God, my mother, she didn't even look at me. Just kept her fork moving, as if the tablecloth was suddenly fascinating. I hadn't spoken since I walked in. I thought maybe silence would be safer. That if I just sat still and didn't breathe too loud, the shame clinging to my skin would settle down. But Mandy wasn't finished. She was the one staying with him, she said, motioning toward me with her wine glass. She was the one who called the ambulance. And guess what? He still didn't make it. So go ahead, tell me that's just a coincidence. I opened my mouth to respond, but nothing came. My hands had started shaking, so I kept them folded tightly in my lap. The room went quiet, not in defense of me, but to let her speak louder. Then, a small voice cut through the stillness. "Mom," my daughter whispered, tugging my sleeve, "did Grandpa really think it was your fault?" I looked down at her, and in that moment, I knew the truth couldn't stay buried much longer. I bent down slightly, brushing a loose curl behind my daughter's ear. "No, sweetie," I whispered, keeping my voice steady for her sake. "He didn't." But even as I said it, I could feel 100 eyes slicing through me. The hush around the table wasn't out of respect. It was loaded with judgment, laced with doubt. Some of them wanted to believe I'd done something. Others just liked having someone to blame. It made grief easier to carry when it had a target. Across the table, Aunt Lorna cleared her throat. "Well," she said, her eyes not quite meeting mine, "whatever happened that night, it doesn't change the fact that he's gone. We're all hurting. We're all hurting." That's what they always say, right before making sure yours is the hurt no one talks about. Mandy leaned back in her chair, triumphant, swirling the wine in her glass like she was the grieving widow instead of the daughter who hadn't visited in months. "It just doesn't sit right," she continued. "All these years, and Dad still never told anyone what was going on in that house. Maybe if he had, things would have ended differently." My lips parted, but I caught myself before saying what I really wanted to say. That he had talked. That those late nights, when the pain kept him from sleeping, and the morphine blurred his words, he told me everything. But I knew no one here would believe it. Not yet. Mom finally spoke then. Quiet. Clipped. "Let's just eat, please." The clatter of silverware resumed like nothing had happened. Like I hadn't just been painted as the villain in my own father's story. Like my daughter hadn't watched it all unfold in real time. I reached for a bread roll, just to keep my hands busy. Lucy squeezed my wrist. "Was that the letter you showed me, Mom? The one Grandpa wrote before?" Her voice trailed off, but the question hung heavy. I nodded slowly. "Yes, that's the one." And in that moment, while the rest of the table ignored us, pretending this dinner was about healing, I knew exactly what I had to do. Dad had left more behind than just a fishing boat and a bad heart. He'd left a truth no one else wanted to face. And I wasn't going to stay silent anymore. I wasn't always the one they ignored. There was a time when I believed, truly believed, that if I loved hard enough, long enough, and quiet enough, they'd see me. I was 16 when Mom sat at the edge of my bed, her hands trembling over an envelope. "We need help," she said. "Your father, he lost his job, the mortgage is behind, and your sister's tuition." That's how it started. I dropped out of choir, picked up shifts at the diner after school, drove Mandy to SAT prep, volleyball, dance recitals, whatever was next on her Golden Girl calendar. When she got into NYU, everyone cried like we'd won the lottery. I remember standing in the kitchen, still in my apron, smelling like French fries and burnt coffee, and watching Dad toast her with his good whiskey. "To our star," he said. No one looked at me. And still, I kept going. When Dad had his first heart scare, it was me who moved back home. Mandy was busy planning her wedding. I said, I'll just stay a few months, until he's stable. That was 6 years ago. You don't notice how a home turns into a hospice until you start counting pill bottles instead of recipe cards. I learned how to clean ports. I tracked medications. I sat beside him at 3 a.m. while he stared blankly at the ceiling, whispering names from his past. I canceled job interviews, dates, vacations. There was always a new reason to stay. And every time Mandy visited, which was rare, she brought a camera. Not for the memories, no. For the narrative. Photos of her next to his hospital bed, holding his hand like a good daughter. And I let her. I let her. Because I thought, maybe it didn't matter who showed up more. Maybe it mattered that someone did. But there were cracks. Dad had moments, lucid ones, where he softened toward me in ways I hadn't expected. One afternoon, after I caught him mid-fall in the kitchen, he looked up at me and said, "You always catch what everyone else drops." It was the closest thing to gratitude I'd ever gotten from him. Still, I never told anyone. What would be the point? Mandy was always going to be the favorite. She was sunshine and polish and ease. I was the glue, invisible until I cracked. Even when Dad got worse and the doctor suggested palliative care, it was me who signed the forms. Me who bathed him, fed him, changed him. I stopped wearing perfume. He said it made him nauseous. I stopped playing music in the house. I even stopped humming while folding laundry. And yet, when he passed, I wasn't the one they hugged. I wasn't the one they thanked. After the funeral, Mandy posted a photo, her in black, holding Dad's hand from 2 months prior, captioned, "Cherish every moment. Rest easy, Daddy. You were my hero." It got hundreds of likes. No mention of the nights I slept on the floor beside his bed when the cough wouldn't let him rest. No mention of the time I drove him 2 hours in the snow to get a second opinion because something in his eyes told me he didn't trust the first doctor. No mention of how I sold my car last spring to cover the new oxygen machine Medicare wouldn't pay for. But then again, none of that was beautiful in pictures. One afternoon, maybe a week after the service, Lucy found me sitting alone on the porch. I didn't hear her at first. My hands were still shaking from trying to scrub the blood from his bed sheets. He'd had a nosebleed the night before he passed, and I'd never gotten to change the linen. She crawled into my lap, small and quiet. "Why do people act like you didn't love Grandpa?" she asked. I couldn't answer. Because the truth is, love is loud when it's easy. But when it's hard, when it's caring for someone who doesn't always say thank you, who sometimes looks past you, even as you're wiping their tears, that kind of love disappears in plain sight. I kept thinking, maybe I should have pushed back more. Maybe I should have spoken up. Made him tell Mandy and Mom what he told me in private, that he knew I was the one holding everything together. But I never wanted a medal. I just wanted them to stop rewriting the story like I hadn't been there at all. The last week of his life, he tried to talk more. His voice was raspy, the words brittle. Sometimes I think he was trying to say something important. Once, he asked me to get his notebook, the one he kept in the drawer by the recliner. I found it, handed it to him, but he waved me away. Said not yet. Whatever he wrote, I never saw. Not then. And I didn't ask. Because I thought there'd be time. Only now, sitting here in the same house where I gave up years of my life, being told I was a burden, a mistake, a disgrace, I realize people don't always wait to give you the credit you deserve. Sometimes you have to take it, even if it means opening a door you swore you'd leave closed. And maybe, just maybe, that notebook is still waiting. The lawyer didn't even look at me when he began. "We're here to carry out the last will and testament of Mr. Gerald Bishop." It was a Tuesday morning. Small conference room, beige walls, bad coffee, the kind of place where families unravel. Mandy wore black again, as if mourning harder made her look more innocent. Mom sat next to her, spine straight, mouth tight, still pretending her silence hadn't already said everything. I sat at the far end of the table, Lucy beside me coloring on a notepad, unaware that everything around her was about to collapse, again. As per Mr. Bishop's instructions, the lawyer continued flipping pages. The house at 814 Oak Ridge Avenue, the retirement fund, and remaining assets are to be transferred to Ms. Amanda Bishop. Mandy smiled before he finished her name. There was no pause. No mention of me. No acknowledgement of the 6 years, the caregiving, the sacrifices. Just nothing. I waited. I thought surely at the end, there would be something. A sentence, a thank you, a worn-out chair even. But the lawyer turned the final page and said, "That concludes the reading." Lucy looked up at me. "Is that it?" she whispered. And I just nodded, because what else was I supposed to do? Mandy stood, smoothed her dress, and hugged the lawyer. "Thank you for handling this so professionally," she said. "It's what Dad would have wanted." I wanted to scream. I wanted to flip the table, to claw the smugness off her face. But I just sat there, hands folded, heart cracking open one silent beat at a time. On the way out, Mom didn't even stop to speak to me. She just said, to no one in particular, "Some people take and still act like victims." Lucy tightened her grip on my hand. "Don't cry, Mom," she said softly. "You know the truth." But even that truth felt fragile now, paper thin, lost beneath the weight of their version of the story. And yet, I didn't fall apart. Not this time, because something had shifted inside me, something cold and clear, a line I hadn't even realized I'd drawn for myself. They wanted me small, they wanted me silent, but that version of me, the good daughter, the obedient one, had died with the last page of that will. They thought this was the end, but they just handed me my beginning. That night, I stood in the kitchen of the house I no longer owned. Mandy had already changed the locks once before. Back when Dad was still alive and I'd taken Lucy out for a weekend at the lake. I'd come home and my key didn't fit. She said it was for safety and laughed like I was paranoid. Now, the locks would change again. Only this time there was no one left to stop her. I walked from room to room, saying goodbye not to furniture or walls, but to versions of myself I had buried in each corner. The woman who used to cook for 3 people, the daughter who stayed when no one else did, the mother who believed teaching her child kindness would be enough to protect her. Lucy watched me from the hallway. "Do we have to leave?" she asked, and it shattered me, how gentle her voice was. How little she asked for. "Yes," I said, "we do." But I didn't cry. Not yet. I packed what I could in silence. My father's old blanket, the wooden spoon he used to stir his tea, the one photo of us from when I was 9, him kneeling beside me at my science fair. He looked proud. I looked like I didn't believe it. There was a knock at the door. Mandy, she didn't even bother stepping inside. "Mom said you'd drag this out. I told her you'd act like a martyr." She looked over my shoulder at Lucy. "Poor kid, bet she has no idea who you really are." I didn't respond. I couldn't. My hands were clenched too tightly around the last box. Then Mandy smirked. "By the way," she added, "the house was always meant for me. Dad told me years ago. He said you were too fragile for responsibility." That word, fragile, hit harder than any slap. She turned and left, heels clicking like applause down the front steps. I closed the door slowly, my body trembling, but not from pain, from clarity. I stood there for a long time after Lucy went to sleep. In the dark, in the stillness, letting the rage crawl through my ribs and settle like iron in my spine. That's when I remembered the notebook. The one Dad had asked for but never opened. The one I'd stuffed in the back of the linen closet, too scared to read. I retrieved it from the top shelf, my fingers brushing over the leather cover like it might burn me. I didn't open it. Not yet. Because whatever was inside, whatever he wrote before he died, would change everything. But I knew one thing, even without reading it. I wasn't going to be erased quietly. It wasn't revenge. It was clarity. That's what I told myself as I sat on the park bench outside the courthouse, notebook in my lap, wind tugging gently at the hem of my coat. Lucy sat beside me, legs swinging back and forth, her little fingers gripping the sleeves of her cardigan. "You don't have to go in alone," she said. "I'll hold your hand the whole time." I smiled at her. Not the smile you give to make a child feel safe. This one was real. She already was my safety, my reason. Inside, the probate hearing was already in motion. Mandy had petitioned for expedited transfer of the house title, arguing that since she was the sole heir listed in the will, there was no need for delay. She called it a formality. Mom showed up in pearls and perfume like this was a church luncheon. They looked like winners. But I wasn't walking in to argue. I was walking in to reveal. The courtroom was colder than I remembered. Too clean, too white. I took my seat quietly, Lucy beside me, clutching her little backpack like it held the weight of the world. "Your Honor," Mandy's lawyer was saying, "this petition follows the original signed will, filed with your office 2 months prior to Mr. Bishop's passing. All paperwork is in order, and my client is prepared to assume property management effective immediately." The judge nodded. "And does anyone contest this?" Silence. Mandy smiled. Then Lucy stood up. "Not me. Not yet." She unzipped her bag, pulled out a sealed manila envelope, and looked the judge dead in the eyes. Her voice didn't shake. "My grandpa gave this to my mom. He said it was important. She didn't read it until after he died." Every head turned. I could hear Mom inhale sharply. Mandy's face darkened like a switch had flipped. I rose slowly. "Your Honor," I said, voice calm but steady, "this document was found in my father's handwriting, inside his personal journal. It was sealed, signed, witnessed by his neighbor, Mr. Talley, a retired notary public. It contains an addendum to the original will." The clerk took the envelope from Lucy's hand. It felt surreal, how gently it passed from her to the court, like something sacred, something heavy with history. The judge opened it, read, then everything stopped. His brow furrowed. He reread a paragraph, then he looked up, looked at me for the first time in this whole process. "It appears," he said carefully, "that Mr. Fulling Bishop submitted a handwritten, legally notarized amendment to his will dated 1 week before his passing. In it, he revokes all prior statements regarding property transfer and instead names his eldest daughter as the rightful beneficiary of the house and all assets connected to it." Mandy gasped. Not dramatically, just a sharp, involuntary sound. Like air had been stolen from her. Mom leaned forward. "No, that's not possible. He never would have." But the judge raised a hand. "This document is valid under the state's holographic will clause, and the notary's affidavit confirms it. The estate will be reassigned accordingly." The silence that followed was not quiet. It was echoing. I felt Lucy slip her fingers into mine, not for comfort this time, but confirmation. Mandy stood, her chair scraping harshly against the floor. "This is absurd," she barked. "You can't just take his word." He was confused at the end. He barely knew what month it was. He trusted me. The judge didn't flinch. "The notary's statement confirms mental clarity at the time of signing. Your father discussed the change openly. His writing is consistent. Unless new evidence emerges, this court has no grounds to dispute the legitimacy." Her mouth opened again, but nothing came out. Mom turned to her, whispering something, low, fast, panicked, but it was too late. The courtroom had already shifted. No longer a story of the grieving daughter wronged. No longer a one-sided performance with Mandy in center stage. The room was watching me now. I didn't smile, I didn't gloat, I didn't even blink. I just exhaled, quietly, like something inside me had finally loosened its grip. The clerk offered the envelope back to me. I shook my head. "Keep it," I said softly. "Let the court preserve it. Let the truth stay where everyone can see it this time." Outside, Mandy stormed past me, heels striking like gunshots on tile. "You planned this," she hissed. "You manipulated him. You waited until he died." "No," I interrupted, finally meeting her eye. "I waited until someone asked what really happened." She froze. "And you know what hurts?" I continued, voice calm. "He wanted to tell you. He asked for you. You were too busy scheduling brunches and photo ops." "You're lying," she spat. I didn't reply. But the look on her face, the flicker of something cracking, something afraid, told me she already knew. Mom didn't look at me at all. Just clutched her purse like it was the last thing in the world she still owned. Lucy reached up and smoothed my sleeve. "You were right, Mom," she whispered. "You didn't need to yell. You just needed to wait for the right page to be turned." We walked out of that courthouse together. Not faster, not triumphant, just lighter. In the parking lot, Mr. Talley, the neighbor who'd witnessed the letter, was waiting by the gate. He tipped his hat. "Your dad said you'd bring it when the time was right," he said. "Told me not to tell anyone. Just to make sure you had something real, when everything else got noisy." I nodded. "Thank you." He smiled gently. He was proud. He didn't always know how to show it, but in the end, he got it right. We drove home in silence. The kind that isn't awkward. The kind that lets healing seep in between the quiet. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with Lucy. We lit a small candle by the window, one Dad always lit during storms. She looked up at me. "Do you think Grandpa's watching?" I folded my hands around hers. "I think he's resting. And you?" I smiled at her. "For the first time in a long while, I think I am too." They didn't call. Not that week. not the next. There were no long-winded explanations, no apologies wrapped in excuses, just silence. And in some ways it was louder than anything they'd ever said. I heard from neighbors instead. Mandy had moved out of the house she'd just leased, couldn't afford it without the inheritance. Her fiancé, who'd once bragged about not marrying into drama, had postponed the wedding indefinitely, quietly, no announcements, just a deactivation of their shared wedding site and a few deleted Instagram posts. Mom, I later learned, had been avoiding her book club. She told one friend it was just too much to socialize lately. Another said she was coping with the embarrassment. Neither of them mentioned me by name. I wasn't someone they'd suddenly learned to respect. I was someone they could no longer explain away. The shift wasn't dramatic. There were no headlines, no crowds cheering my name outside the courthouse, just a slow unraveling of their version of the story. At the grocery store, Mrs. Callahan from down the street leaned in over her cart and whispered, "I always wondered why we never saw Mandy when your father got sick. But you were always there. Quiet." I should have said something sooner. I didn't respond. I just smiled. Not the kind of smile you give when you've won, more like the kind that slips out when someone finally sees what was always right in front of them. One morning, I opened my inbox and saw an email from the church board. The same church where Mandy had once led community drives in Dad's name. It read, "Dear Miss Bishop, we'd like to extend an invitation to speak during our next remembrance service. It's clear now how much your father leaned on you during his final years. We regret not recognizing that sooner." It was short, measured, but it felt like the first brick of a new foundation. Still, I didn't go. I didn't need their stage or their spotlight. I had the house. I had the truth. I had Lucy. That was enough. About a month later, Mom showed up. She didn't call ahead, just appeared one afternoon, standing stiffly on the porch like she wasn't sure if she was welcome. Truth is, I wasn't sure either. I opened the door and waited. She looked smaller somehow. Or maybe it was just the first time I'd seen her without the armor of certainty. "I brought you this," she said quietly, holding out a brown bag. "The rest of your grandmother's dishes. I thought maybe Lucy might want them someday." I took the bag, said thank you. Nothing more. She stood there for a long while, eyes darting around, avoiding mine. She looked at the windows, the flower bed Lucy had planted, the porch swing still creaking from the breeze. "I didn't know," she said finally. "About the letter, about everything." "I did," I replied, not cold, just honest. She flinched like the truth had been sharper than she expected. "I didn't mean to," she began. I raised a hand. "Mom, we're past that. We're just in different stories now." She blinked, eyes wet but not falling. She was always careful never to cry in front of people, even when it mattered. "Okay," she whispered. "Then I'll go." She turned, but before she stepped off the porch, Lucy came bounding down the hallway behind me, her voice bright. "Grandma?" Mom froze, slowly turned. Lucy held out a small ceramic mug, one she'd painted at school. It said, "Love grows here," in wobbly pink letters. "I made this for you before, all of it. I didn't get to give it." Mom took it in both hands. She nodded, didn't say a word, just walked down the steps and disappeared around the hedges. That was the last time I saw her, not out of anger, just finality. Some people leave without slamming the door. Later that night, I lit a candle in the kitchen, the same one Dad used to light. And I stood there for a while, looking out over the quiet lawn, thinking about how long I'd chased a version of family that never really existed. Now it was quiet. Now it was mine. The house was in my name. The story was in my hands. And the people who once spoke the loudest were finally silent. But not because I silenced them, because the truth did. Some mornings, I still catch myself listening for Dad's cough down the hall. It's been months now, and the house is quiet. Not the kind of silence that aches, but the kind that settles. Like dust finally allowed to rest after a storm. Lucy's room is brighter than it ever was. She painted the windowsill lavender and added paper stars to the ceiling. The sound of her humming fills the space that used to hold grief. I never tell her to quiet down. Last week, she came home from school with a potted plant and said, "It's for the front porch. It means new beginnings." I didn't ask her who told her that. I just helped her place it where the sun would hit in the morning. There's no plaque on the house, no framed newspaper clippings, no sign that says, "Justice was served here." But I know. Every time I step into that kitchen, every time I light that same little storm candle by the window, I know. I don't replay the courtroom in my head anymore. I don't think about Mandy's face when the judge read Dad's amendment. I don't need to. Because I didn't win to see her lose. I won to see me come back to life. It's strange, the way pain rearranges you. How it carves out everything you thought you were, and then leaves just enough room to rebuild something stronger and quieter. The other day, I ran into Mrs. Callahan again. She asked how I was doing, and for the first time in years, I didn't hesitate. "I'm good," I said. Not pretending good, just steady. She nodded. "You look like someone who finally stopped shrinking. Maybe that's what this really is. Not revenge, not vindication. Just a life that no longer requires permission." Sometimes I wonder what Dad would say now, if he saw the house, the garden, the way Lucy sets 2 teacups out on Sunday mornings, just in case Grandpa's spirit wants to sit. I think he'd be quiet, the way he always was when something mattered more than words. He wouldn't apologize again. He already did. On paper, in ink, with a trembling hand and a final breath of honesty. But I think he'd smile at Lucy. I think he'd be proud she was watching. Because the truth didn't just free me. It shaped her. And that's what I want to say to you. Whoever you are, wherever you're watching this, if you've ever been told to stay quiet, to keep your head down, to carry blame that was never yours, I hope you know. You don't have to yell to be heard. You don't have to fight to be right. You don't have to prove yourself to people who built their love around conditions. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is wait and heal. And speak when it's your time, not when they demand it. If you've ever walked away from a family table and felt like your seat was never really yours, you're not alone. And if you're still carrying a story no one ever let you tell, tell it. Even if it's just to yourself. Even if it's quiet. Even if it trembles. Because truth has a way of surviving. Even in silence. If this story reminds you of something you've lived through, leave a comment below. Or send it to someone who needs to know they aren't the only one. And if you're still standing after being shut out, doubted, blamed, then you're the kind of strong that doesn't break. The kind they never saw coming.